Hello and welcome back to the Pin Podcast. This is episode number 20. And if you can't tell by the decor and this wig, yes, this fabulous hair is a wig. It's Halloween, so I wanted to just change it up. I mean, if you do follow me on Instagram, you'll see that I've done so many different Halloween looks, from zombie to pinup art. Even did a silent movie star. So check out my YouTube or Facebook and you'll get to see all those looks. And my Instagram is PinUp Miami. And we have a sponsor for this episode. I'm all topsy-turvy because it's Halloween. But the sponsor for this episode is Poetic Clothing. Just like the podcast, it is a modern living with a vintage flair. Their clothes are made out of modern fabrics, really soft knits that you could dress casual or for an evening out. Make sure to follow them at Wax Poetic Clothing on Instagram or on their website to shop at waxpoetic.clothing.com. Now, today, like I said, this is the Halloween Spectacular, and I wanted to bring a very special guest that every time I host a pinup contest at a tattoo expo, for sure she is there. And she has the most amazing things you'll ever see. Now, it's not for everyone, but I mean, I think it should be for everyone because it's just so interesting. Her name is Tara. She's from Flipside Creations. Her Instagram is Flipside Creations Art. And I'll also put all her contact info down below. She does fun and spooky oddities that will make you flip over. Right, Tara?
Pretty much. Yep, oddities you'll flip for.
And now, what would you, for people that don't know, because I do have a few viewers of mine that don't know what an oddity is. Can you explain?
Sure. Oddities are broken down. That's sort of the main group. But it's broken down to wet specimens, which is something that's completely whole and is preserved. So that way it'll stay in the longevity in the liquid. Then there's also skulls, which is another subgroup. Taxidermy. And then another part, which is natural science. It's all sort of natural science, but that's butterflies and insects. So it's everything that you've seen from the back of your science classroom growing up, something you'll see in a natural science museum, to possibly an oddities collection, maybe a spooky haunted house, or maybe your favorite tattoo artist might have some oddities for some conversation at their shop.
Oh, see, I don't have a tattoo. I didn't know, but I could see there is a local tattoo shop here that does have an oddity shop next to it. I would have not put two and two together, but now it makes sense because I see you at the tattoo expos.
Yes, and a lot of artists that you wouldn't even think of will use the specimens as drawing references. If you're going to do a tattoo of a bird skull, then what better than to have a hornbill skull from South Africa? Or if you're going to do a cat tattoo, what better way than to have a cat skull where you could angle it and get the right lighting that you want and the exact perspective that you want for that tattoo.
Now, I think this is a question most people would ask you, and I'm sure you've heard many times. How did you get into this?
Yes, there's one. I grew up taking art classes in high school and in college, and there was always a big skull that you happen to look at in your classroom that you'd use for still lifes. Why I actually got into it, it's a very personal reason. And when my mom passed away in 2004, she had been buried. And it was very, very difficult for me to deal with the decaying process and the process of death. So I literally had to look at things from a different point of view and to be able to appreciate what happens with the life after death. So that's how I got into doing skulls, to sort of indoctrinate, that comfort that I had again. And then it's sort of grown much further 10 years down the line. And now it's what's the weirdest, coolest, craziest thing that I can hunt down and to be able to find a new home for.
Oh, that's so interesting. Something you might not know about me is I used to be an embalmer.
Really? Wow.
Totally different.
All connected, right? It's totally, well, it's not so different because when I have a wet specimen, let's just say I have a cow eyeball. It's a little round jar. And
before you continue, if you're listening or on Apple or Spotify, check out the YouTube because she's gonna have visuals of some of her oddities, and you're not gonna want to miss out. Sorry, Tara.
No. Throw in whatever you need to. So the eyeball that I'm holding, it's a cow eyeball, and you can see this is the little iris and everything. This is the back part, all the tissue, and you can even see the optic nerve in the back. So how this gets preserved is it first gets injected with formaldehyde.
Mm-hmm.
Then it goes through a formalin solution soak. So this is essentially
embalming.
Exactly. And it's now in a rubbing alcohol solution because that way it keeps it in a sanitized environment. And unlike embalming with just formalin or formaldehyde, this will last about 50 years. Where
it doesn't deteriorate, no?
It does not. After many, many years, like if you have a wet specimen that is deteriorating and has sediment and stuff on the bottom, you don't want it because it shows that it hasn't fully been preserved. When I do it, I inject them from the outside in, and then from the inside out they get preserved, and then they get soaked from the outside in. So they get like a double formaldehyding, embalming, preservation that's done with each one of them. If you have a wet specimen, and that's the type of wet specimen where it's kept whole, and then, for example, this little tiny guy that I'm going to show, he's a little squirrel, and it's like in a little vial, maybe 2.5, 3 inches. He came from a sanctuary, and unfortunately he didn't make it, and we'll get into a little bit of how I procure them and where they come from and their little backgrounds and stuff. So that would be a wet specimen because you see him in his entirety. So if someone gets a wet specimen and there's a lot of sediment there or it smells,
they should have gone to Flipside.
Should have gone to Flipside. I can't tell you how they preserve them. All I can do is tell you how I preserve them.
And how did you learn? How did you pick up skills for taxidermy and what you just told me about wet specimens?
I had such a huge interest in wanting to learn more about them. A friend of mine had given me a little tiny fetal bunny rabbit. And fetal is something that, of course, wasn't born yet. The mom died, maybe even came from the food industry. So the little baby didn't make it. And then I ended up being gifted it. It was so cute. And from that point on, I was like, okay, I want to learn how to do this. I did a lot of research. I watched free 1.5-hour long classes in universities and science labs of how to preserve specimens to look at them under a microscope. So it's all self-taught, trial and error, because I make sure that something has been kept in my collection for 6 months to a year to make sure that that preservation process is going to last. In the beginning, now I sort of have my process down, but everything was self-taught and just trial and error and a whole lot of research.
And then how was your first taxidermy experience?
It didn't come out great at all. There's 2 different ways that you can do the taxidermy. Some people might not know that if someone has a deer taxidermied, the only part that's real out of that taxidermy is the skin from the deer.
I knew it.
Yes, exactly. Not only is the skin, say if you see like a deer head, so the skin and the antlers. There's a foam form that's underneath. The eyes are glass. The mouth and the nose are all fake as well. So if you see like a lion or, something that you see at the Museum of Natural Science, all of those bodies are fake. They're all filled in with different forms. So that's the one way to do it. Or there's 2 that you can end up doing a free form of your own where you sort of sculpt something, you can get some foam, and then you shape it down, and then you can use that on top. So whenever you do the taxidermy, you essentially skin whatever it is, preserve that skin, that fur from the inside. So you're literally preserving and leathering, tanning that skin. Then that goes over the form, or there's a way of mummification that is literally injected and then dried. Injected with formaldehyde stops the decaying process, and then it ends up getting dried on the outside. So there's 3 different types of taxidermy. I was very nervous. I didn't want to mess it up. And one of the first taxidermies that I had to do that I received was a penguin skin from Patagonia. Exactly. I didn't start with a mouse. I didn't start with a rat. This was supposed to be tanned. I got it from the Falkland Islands, and they're juveniles that died on the beaches there after storms, and they're warm weather penguins. So I get this penguin, spent a whole lot of money for the penguin, import exportation license, took 3 months to come into the country and get approved and everything. Skin was supposed to be preserved, and I get it, and there's this black trash bag, duct taped, wrapped up, and that was my penguin skin inside of there. And I don't know why I didn't think about it. Oh my God, did it stink like fish. It makes sense, because that's what they eat, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm not throwing this thing out. I'm going to figure out how to tan it and how to preserve it. I wanted it originally to be stuffed, taxidermied myself, and have someone else taxidermy it. It didn't work out that way. So I ended up having different parts of it that were preserved. And the first part of it that I was going to sell ended up being to a penguin researcher that were studying flighted versus non-flighted birds. Oh, and wow. She had to know exactly what feather came from where on the wing, on the wing, to know exactly what feather it was that they were studying. So she asked to buy it. And I was like, okay, that's it. I'm going to piece the penguin out. So I kept it. Yeah, so that's how my first taxidermy piece went.
That's a conversational piece now.
Pretty much. And out of that...
Sorry, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Out of that, I kept the most magical bottle of feathers ever. Like, imagine the dow of an angel feather. This is pretty much what the penguin feather is like. So I'm holding up a little jar now, and if you could see how perfect the little feathers are. I mean, it's hard to see, like, the detail of it.
Oh, wow.
But they're like the most perfect little feathers.
They look so fluffy.
So, yes. So these are little penguin feathers, and then I saved what I'm holding up is the penguin flipper.
Oh, wow.
And with it being a juvenile, so I'm holding it up. It's probably about 6 inches, and it has the bone still attached because when you taxidermy any type of bird, you leave the leg bone in as well as the little flipper wing, and then that's the other side. It's pretty neat, right?
That is awesome.
This is in my prized possession. So for those of you guys who are looking on YouTube, you'll get to see the penguin flipper for yourself. It's pretty neat.
That's awesome. And have you ever so I want to go back. I had a question about the mummification process. So does that tend to sink in since it doesn't have a foam core, or?
There's 2 different ways. Yes, if you just have something mummified, maybe it's a little possum or something, it gets dried out. So it does. It looks mummified. It looks, you can see its ribs, you can see all of its bones through the tissue and everything. If you're going to do something like a bunny rabbit or a squirrel that is mummified and taxidermied, what you do is you take out all of their innards, their intestines and everything, and then that being preserved with a formaldehyde then gets put into a dryer, or even taxidermists will have industrial-sized, like walk-in refrigerators, and that's how they do their mummification process. So it's a lot more professional. You can actually see the teeth in something. You can see the nose. So yes, if you just mummify something and you dry it, it will look just like a little mummy, just like you would see a mummy on TV. And then if you want to mummify it and taxidermy it, then you'll get the best look of something that has its natural nose and teeth and stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was curious about that. Have you ever done fish? Or is not really?
Fish are very difficult to dry out because they always smell like fish.
Like,
right?
Is that why they? Yeah, you're right, and that's why they like have a fiberglass feel to them. Maybe
you want to talk about fish and taxidermy and this whole fake, there is nothing, absolutely nothing in a fish taxidermy, a marlin, the colorful dolphin, that are the blues and yellows and stuff, the small ones that people eat. There is not a single real part of a fish on that whole thing. They actually have
if not,
a
it would smell like fish.
Exactly. What they do is they'll take a photo of the actual fish, and there are people that will shape it, that'll put those parts to it and stuff, the fake parts and everything, and they will airbrush it like the one that you caught. I have 2 lionfish because I worked with someone that was an importer of different fish. So they would get them in, and unfortunately many of them will die whenever they get them. And with a fish, you also have to preserve it within hours of it dying. Because if not, it gets a little slimy and it is not worth preserving. The only thing I've been able to do with the fish, to save their color, you have to do a whole technical process for you to be able to save their color. That's something I'm still experimenting with. And I have been able to diaphanize it, which is a process of chemically staining and clearing it. So you can see all the bones and everything in the tissue.
Oh, wow. See? Because every time I drive by, there's this place by the Bass Pro Shop around Fort Lauderdale that says taxidermy. And I'm like, I wonder, is that the same process? Because a fish, I don't know. And they always look so hard. Now I know.
Yeah, right. They will offer like 95, right? And they have like the big store outside.
Yes. It's all fake.
Exactly. I mean, after this, you'll be able to go anywhere you want and be like, this is not real. This is real. I know how they did this.
No, my dad, he likes to like growing up, my dad would take us fishing every weekend and he always wanted those big fishes. And he's like, no, I'm going to one day have a really big, real one. And now I could be like, you're never going to have a real one.
Right. I mean, yes, it's the hunt of the catch and everything, but it's not the same thing when you're not getting the actual thing that was caught. They're still amazing and they look great, but it's not the real fish. It's more of an artistic airbrushing of the real fish. Go.
Hey, they're perfectly colored. The scales would chip, I don't know, they chip off.
Pretty much. Yeah, then you gotta fish.
And you gotta fish them. And what is the biggest piece that you've ever taxidermied?
Since I travel around at tattoo conventions mainly and sell my wares there and set up a booth, I try to keep things smaller because people are going to have to travel with them once they buy them, and I'm going to have to travel as well. So I like to keep my biggest taxidermy to maybe a raccoon,
a bat, another wide.
Bats are a whole other thing. Yes, I like to get different bats. Bats are actually preserved before they even come into the country because by law, they have to have a certificate of decontamination before they do come in. Bats are all protected species in the United States. If you see a bat, leave it alone. If it's on the ground, it's not a bat that's healthy. It's not doing very well. So if you have one in the house and you want to protect it, yes, you can get a towel and you wrap a towel around it and you put it outside. That's a different situation. I'm talking about just one that's just outside because they're supposed to be hanging from the trees. So in the United States, they're all completely protected. The most common bat that we have in the United States is the brown bat. It's a type of micro bat. So it maybe gets its wingspan 6-7 inches and eats mosquitoes, and that's why they're also so protected. One, some will have rabies because they don't live in their natural habitats. They're living in attic and abandoned malls and strip centers. They're just told to be left alone. A few years ago, there was something, white nose virus, which killed many, many colonies in the United States. Like they were requiring people to wear covering on their booties and stuff to even go into the caves. And it wasn't killing them, but it was affecting the respiratory system. So when they flew out at dawn, then they weren't able to fly back and have the energy. So I know, right? Right?
Wow.
So the bats that I will get will come from places that actually use them for food. I get them mainly from Indonesia. We might have recently have heard with the whole start of the whole COVID thing that it came from bats that were actually consumed. And then the virus crossed over. All of the bats I get are from Indonesia. They're all injected with formaldehyde first. Then
and
they
they're certified.
Position, exactly. Import exportation license, certification, decontamination and stuff. So they go through a process where they are safe to go into people's hands. And they're living in their natural environments. So why they're eaten is, one, it's a cheap, valuable food source. And the fruit bats, they're maintaining and trying to population control their valuable fruit and nut sources that the people use to survive.
Oh my gosh, I'm learning so much in this.
Who would have thought, right?
I know. And I have another question. So how do you find, now I know how you get your bats, but just a gist of how you get your animals.
My animals, it's a important question that people who are not so familiar, like you had mentioned about oddities, I would rather them take the moment and ask. Because sometimes it's just lack of know-how, lack of just the knowledge and the education of where some of these come from. And sometimes there is an assumption. Again, I know where I get them from and who I work with. After 10 and a half years of doing this, I've made many contacts throughout the United States as well as internationally as well. I like to get things. I don't collect roadkill. In the state of Florida, it's really frowned upon because whatever it is you pick up is messing up the food chain in the ecosystem.
I didn't know that either. And I'm in Florida.
Yep. If you see a deer, and people eat many deer out here, you have to contact the Fish and Wildlife and ask them for permission to take that freshly, unfortunately, killed deer home. So I will get them, if I get any thing that is killed, roadkill essentially, is from some people that I know by a cornfield in Virginia, where it is perfectly okay and it's legal there. I work with sanctuaries, reserves, snake labs. I work with a gentleman down in South Florida. He breeds exotic blue iguanas. So he trades with an exotic reptile shop. Anything that dies, they throw into the freezer. And that helps the decaying process from decaying anymore. They give them to him. He gives them to the blue iguanas. And then I buy them from him. So that's one example of just how I get my reptiles. Again, working with sanctuaries, reserves. I'll work sometimes with veterinary places or people that go out and they spay and neuter wild cats. Fortunately, if they're emaciated and inundated with fleas and everything, then they don't make it. So I'll buy them from him. It's actually a couple that does it, a husband and wife. And then they're able to use that money to put back into what they do to help out the cats and the dogs and stuff.
It's like a whole cycle.
It is. It really, really, really is. And that's why I say that essentially I'm giving these items new life. And for people who might be a little uncomfortable with it, I tell them not only am I honoring these specimens, these animals, these insects while they're alive, but I'm giving them honor when they've passed. So I am honoring the entirety of that animal, not just when it's alive. And anything that I'll get, I work with people who are hunters. Only if they are hunting something for food. If they're doing it for sport, I don't even mess with it. And it's given me a new outlook on people who do hunt because they are so connected with their food source. And then they really don't want anything to go to waste. So I get claws and teeth. And then that's that full cycle of not having anything of that animal go to waste. So that's just a couple of the different ways that I'll end up getting some of my specimens.
And what do you do with so when you, I know I'm going back to one of the other questions, it just came to me. When you do taxidermy and you skin, well, I don't know if skinning is the word, skinning the animal, What do you do with the bones and the innards? Everything.
It depends. There's a process that you can keep the whole skeleton. And there's different ways to do it. Someone can have a backyard. Like, I get people all the time that are like, okay, I found this, or my rat died and I want to keep the head. How do I do that? So I tell them, okay, you live in a backyard, you have a backyard. Yeah. Find an ant pile. Put some, like a black trash bag down. Put it on the black trash bag, and then put like a milk crate or something over it. And then that way nothing carries it away. And then those ants will actually eat everything on there. And then you'll have the skeleton. And then you get to play like skeleton puzzle and put it all back together. So
yes.
Yes, that is exactly. That's actually not even the worst way of doing it. That's actually where you don't really smell it because it's sort of out further in the yard. Now, universities will do their specimens where they'll have their students macerate it, where they put it in water, and then the bacteria in the water will actually eat it, and then you got to dump it out and do it, dump it out and do it. And it's gross, and it's stinky, and then you have to degrease it, and then it gets whitened and sanitized. It's a whole process, and it takes like months and months to do.
Oh, wow.
Or the last way, you could do it through dermestid beetles. Oh. You might be familiar with those because, well, not because you were embalming the whole body.
But the history.
Exactly. Say a university wants to have a skeleton and they have a body donated. They will use dermestid beetles, which is flesh-eating beetles, that will eat everything. Tissue, skin, everything. They don't eat hair, though. But flesh and everything, essentially, where they're named from, and they'll leave a really nice skeleton. So when you taxidermy something, you can do that with the body. I actually preserve hearts and different organs and stuff. And then sometimes you can just take it, depending on where you live. Some people that'll do it will just put it back outside, let the wildlife eat it. Or if someone is hunting and then after they do the meat and everything and then they'll skin it, they'll leave that carcass there for all the other animals to eat.
Another circle.
Pretty much.
Hi. And how did you get the name Flipside? Like, how did you come up with it?
Flipside Creations. Originally, Flipside Creations was a jewelry company where I took Scrabble tiles and I was doing custom art, logos, softball teams, where I would do the art and then adhere it to the front side of the Scrabble tile. And then, actually the back side where it was flat. And then it was wearable art that you'll flip over. And I kept it with the logo and it was square and everything. As it transitioned, it became wearable oddities that you'll flip over. So that was the transition. And I did gemstones, and then there was some skulls that I was doing, and I was doing creepy cameos. So as I transitioned, it's more of Flipside because I like to consider the things that I do creepy and cute. So there's literally the two sides to the flip side.
I like it. That's why I've always been attracted to your table. It's going to be now, I think, almost 4 years since the first show I saw you here in South Florida at the South Florida Tattoo Expo.
It's been a while.
Which is actually the first show that I hosted. So,
really?
Yeah,
wow.
That one with
so
Tattoo Dave.
Started, right? Exactly.
Yeah. Oh. You're the lucky charm. And I want to show everyone. I know you have a naked duck, no?
Yes.
My favorite creations that she has are the ducks because she like poses them in different personalities and they have a life of their own. It's awesome. Look at that. It's a little sneak peek.
What I normally like to do, isn't he cute? He's just cute. He's got a little bit of an attitude. He's got a little natural mohawk.
He has my same hair color.
Pretty much. I mean, I don't know if we coordinated, but it worked out the way it was supposed to be, right?
I wanted him to shine.
Well, I appreciate that. I like to channel all of my taxidermy's inner spirit. Did they go out and party over the weekend? Did they want to be a pinup? Were they a dancer working their way through college, all sorts of creative ideas. I just
Dracula.
Count Quackula.
Count Quackula.
Count Quackula. They definitely have their names. I did a Rat Smith when Doctor Who was around. So they definitely have their own personalities, and I like to do White Rabbits from Alice in Wonderland. And then I just did a bunch of Halloween ones where I get to like add in some of the other creative aspects where I get to like make the little hats and everything on.
And you have a bunny, no? A bunny?
Yes, this is a cute little bunny. He's an all white bunny. Isn't he cute? Look at his little ears. His little face. Now, let's see if I can show you. I haven't finished them yet because when you do them, you take cards and you actually clip them into the ears so the ears can dry. But you have to shape them. So if I could show you here, it's a little hard to see. I don't know if I could show you. But I want to see, not necessarily so much on him, but so this is his real nose, and sometimes I get his little teeth to show.
Mm-hmm.
So he actually has wires that go through him. So he's got the little ears that end up having the wires that go in. And then same thing with the ducks. So here's little bunny rabbit. He's all white. And the reason why he's all white is because he's actually one that's used for food.
Oh.
So instead of being consumed for one day, same thing with the ducks. The ducks, you ever been to Chinatown and you see the ducks hanging in the window, the Peking ducks? Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of the ducks that I get are Peking ducks because they're the males that end up not being kept for the eggs and the ones that don't make it towards the food and everything. So instead of them being consumed for one night, I tell people now they're enjoyed for many, many, many nights. They get put on hand-stained wood bases. Everything gets signed on the bottom. And people will tell me that they went on vacation with them. This ducky's traveled 20,000 miles and it's gone to this and this and this. And people really love them. So they really do get the love that unfortunately they didn't get while they were alive. Mm-hmm. So that's where some of these guys come from. And like the little ducky, this is his real beak. He's got glass eyes. His head gets preserved and stuffed and then pinned through into the body. And then the feet and everything are his real feet that get dried. And then they get pinned through.
And then they get glamified after.
Exactly. Then their inner spirit gets channeled and they tell me how they want to be dressed.
And you have such creative ideas, guys. Make sure you got to go to her Instagram, Flipside Creations Art, and check her out. Because it's awesome. And then the last question I had for you is, do you ever have any requests, or how do you feel about people that want to taxidermy their pets?
Oh, I get asked that a lot. That's probably one of my more popular messages that I'll get. Like I got one 2 days ago. My baby, it was a baby, rat that didn't make it, and it was skinless, hairless. And they're like, it didn't make it, and I just want to preserve the tail. Can you do that? Now, I used to do that, but it took so much time to explain to someone how to do it, when it's going to pass, what they have to do, how to ship it, the process of what to do. And it made me very nervous because that's their pet. And for me, it's so hard to channel, like where I channel the inner spirit of something. You have to channel the spirit of what their animal was, what their pet and their fur baby was. That's not something I'm able to do. So with that, I've been able to refer them to a couple of people that I trust that do really well. And you could get whiskers that are preserved. You get a foot. You can get all sorts of things. You can get the whole thing, get taxidermy. You can get the skeleton, whatever it is you want. So I don't do that, but I really understand wanting to have that done. And when my puppy of many, many years, fur baby, passed away, she had this little mole. and she had this little whisker that came out, and I called it her Bobby D, or little Robert De Niro.
Mm-hmm.
So I had clipped that, and I wear it in a little vial. So I can understand wanting to have a memento on something that is very cherished that you can keep with you. But I don't do it. But I can tell you so.
That's why I was curious, because I felt like none of your items were like that. But I wanted to know.
Yes, I get lots of pets that are donated where, like, I'll get some things, interestingly enough, if someone has a snake and they feed them live rabbits, rats, and stuff. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do that personally because I would want to save all of the food, you know? But the ones that don't make it, they can't feed that thing that died to their animal. So then they'll give it to me. Or if someone has a pet and they don't want to bury it, they want it to still get love and stuff. I get stuff donated all the time. There's stuff that I buy, like I work with a goat farm that they make goat soap, like goat milk soap and stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, all sorts of connections. So sometimes I will have animals that are passed along to me as well, so I can pass them along to the right person.
Ooh. Wow, this has been so informative, and I can't think of any other guest I would have for today's episode of, Halloween edition of the Pin Podcast.
Yes,
because it is something that's so interesting, and like you said, people need to be educated about it as well. So I'm really happy that my platform would hopefully enlighten my viewers and listeners. And do you have anything else you want to share?
Yes, I think it's great that you do have the platform and you are able to help people learn a little bit more about it. I actually do educational programs with different schools where I'm like their guest speaker. And like I just did 2 4th grade classes before everything was closed. And I'm able to bring things and talk to them about it. Some of the questions that they ask, and there's so much knowledge behind things. And it's really neat because some people wouldn't think that oddities, that a bunch of dead things, could be really excited. 4th grade class could be very excited about. I work with sanctuaries and reserves in California. Like I have a bunch of different hornbills. Birds, super protected species in the United States, except for birds that are foul. And starlings, which actually come from England. You see a bird skull or anything, you just want to leave it alone. You find a hawk, a bird of prey, feather, leave it alone. Unless you're a Native American Indian, it's a $10,000 fine. Migratory Bird Act. And so that kind of stuff you just want to leave. So for some people who might, they call it vulture culture, where they might find like skulls by railroad tracks and stuff. Just want to give people a heads up. Leave the bird stuff alone. Something I can show is this skull, for those of you that see. This is a hornbill skull.
Oh, wow.
It's about 7 inches long and about 4 inches tall. And it looks very prehistoric. And actually, birds are the one living animal on Earth that are directly related to dinosaurs, which is kind of neat. So it has this big mouth because it cracks the different nuts.
Oh.
And these are hollow, so they're very, very light.
Yeah, I heard it when you opened and closed it.
Right?
It wasn't so...
Yep, so that one's one type of hornbill, and then there's one that looks like a little tiny toucan almost, because it's got the color on it. And this is actually more of the rare ones, even though it's smaller. So it's about 4 inches and much shorter, and it's got like a reddish brown tip to it, and it's more yellow. So those are just a couple of things that, even though they're hornbills, there's so many different species. So it's great to be able to have people learn about it as oddities, but also open their minds more about the educational aspects of it. And last but not least, since I talked about the bats, I want to show you this little guy.
Oi!
Isn't he cute? So for those of you that are listening, it's a micro bat, and he's about 2.5 inches tall. He's in the sleeping vampire position, and he's actually hanging from his feet. And why they do that is because why they hang from their feet is because they don't have enough strength in their legs to be able to run and to be able to kick off to fly.
Oh.
But their feet have tendons that'll wrap around the branch. that they don't even have to think of. It just stays like that while they're sleeping. Then to let go, all they do is undo their foot and then they swoop down and they fly. So this cute little guy, see if I see his little face. See if I do it this way. He's furry. He's got little teeny tiny teeth. Because
you look
this
like
is
a makeup influencer. Just
pretty much. Right. Thank you. That's where I learned it from. Because I was like, wait, that really does work.
It helps focus. But yeah,
Yes.
so cute.
So he's got little teeth, his little ears.
I see the teeth.
Right? Because you figure he eats mosquitoes. He's like a meat eater. And then here's his little back. He's all furry and everything. He's been injected, positioned, done with formaldehyde, and then heated up for many hours, essentially mummifying him. So I just wanted to show you the cute little guy that is basically a teeny tiny bat for Halloween, and I thought he would be perfect.
He's adorable. I love it. Tara, thank you so much.
You're so very, very welcome. Thank you for having me, and it was great to chat and to educate anybody out there.
Yes, and make sure to subscribe and leave a comment. I'll make sure to, or head over to her Instagram and say hi and check out her stuff. And if you have any other questions, leave them down below or again, reach out to Tara. And thank you guys so much. It really means a lot, Tara, that you're here for this Halloween special. And then
my honor.
Next week, I'm going to actually have another Tara.
Nice.
Yeah. But a lot of people know her as Harlow Holiday. She's a burlesque dancer up north in Syracuse. And she's a plus size burlesque dancer, but she owns her body. So I'm excited to talk to her.
Yes.
And yeah, so I will see you all next week.